Cato Sherman was born around 1850 in South Carolina. He was married to a woman named Delia Dupree. She was born around 1855, also in South Carolina. They had their first child in 1870, a boy named George. They had a little girl named Lula in 1873. The two were going to have 17 children. The morning after Christmas, 14-year-old Lula was at home alone. Her father, Cato, had left early that morning, perhaps to go to work or to visit someone. Her mother, Delia, was also gone. She was attending a funeral. Lula was left in charge of her 8-year-old younger sister while her parents were gone. For Lula, I'm sure she didn't think much of it. It was just another Monday. She could have been playing with her sister, or maybe she was doing chores her mother asked her to do. We don't know exactly, but we do know this. The normalcy and mundaneness of that day was about to leave. Lula was about to go through something that is going to shock your conscience. She heard someone approaching the front door. Then she heard a knock. At first she thought it might have been their landlord, G.W. Miller. But when she opened the door, she saw another white man, someone she didn't know. His name was Mance Waldrop. He was 35 years old. Now Waldrop had no dealings with the Sherman family. He wasn't even from Central. He lived a few miles away in Anderson County. Seeing Waldrop standing in front of her, Lula went from nervous to scared and afraid. And rightfully so, because he was a white man that she didn't know, and he was at her home, and her parents were gone. And you have to remember, this is not like someone coming to your door today. Not a solicitor, not someone leaving a flyer. During this time, black people lived in meager and sometimes barely livable accommodations on a white planter's property. There would have been no reason for a white man to come to a sharecropper shack in 1887, unless it was to collect or to lynch. So Waldrop's very presence there meant danger. Cato and Delia returned home later that day. Again, we don't have all the details on what happened, but we know this. Lula didn't tell them. She didn't tell them what had happened. Her mother Delia saw that something was off with her daughter. Lula wasn't as talkative as usual. She seemed shaken and upset, but Delia couldn't figure out what was wrong. She tried to get Lula to talk, tried to get her to open up, but Lula didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain what had just happened to her. So she said nothing. She carried the confusion, the pain, the trauma, and the shame that wasn't hers and never should have been, all by herself. She suffered in silence. Once Garvin got the buggy, the three men set out for the Pickens jail, taking the main road. They got about a mile out when they saw it. Black men started coming out of the darkness and appeared in the road. But at first, it was just a few. Then more appeared. Constable Garvin whipped the mule to go faster. The black men gave chase. Then, out of nowhere, another dozen black men stepped into the road. What Garvin and Eden had been warned about just moments earlier was now standing right in front of them. And these men didn't come to talk. Then shots rang out. Waldrop was hit in the head, but not fatally. The shot only grazed him. By this time, Dr. Folger and a group of white men had arrived on the scene. They stepped between Waldrop and the black men, and for a moment, it looked like the lynching might be stopped. Waldrop began walking back towards town, trying to get away. But the black men would not be stopped, and they would not take no for an answer. They pushed past Folger and the others and took hold of Waldrop. They then turned to the white men and told them to leave. And that's exactly what they did. They left, turned around, and went the other way, leaving Mance Waldrop with a group of black men. We don't know what happened next. Don't know if they made Waldrop confess. Don't know if he begged for his life. All we know is this.
Do y'all want to know why it was so important for them to force us to convert to Christianity? Not because they wanted to spread enlightenment in the good word, but because they were very afraid of us. I'm pretty sure y'all heard of the Haitian Revolution. Oh, you know where black people fought against the French and won? They were so nervous, they even made laws.
1685, a law in Haiti prohibited the practice of African religions and forced slave owners to actually push their slaves to adapt the Christian faith within 8 days.
Now, I really want to just ask this question. Y'all got knives, bayonets, swords, pistols, muskets, rifles, canyons, bombs. So here's the big question. How did enslaved people with no upgraded weapons fight and beat against these people? Well, this is Cecile Fatima, and she was a Haitian voodoo priestess. And she did a voodoo ceremony to summon the strength to win against these colonizers. A week later, 18,000 plantations were destroyed, and 1,000 slaveholders got what they deserved. Now I can see why these colonizers want to demonize their practices. I mean, imagine seeing people like this doing these ceremonies, converting their energy to fight against you. Very strongly put in the Bible. Slaves, be obedient to your human master with fear and tremble in the sincerity of heart as to Christ. There were instances of colonizers' teeth falling out through battle. Stomach pains, headaches, issues within the colonizer soldiers. I mean, look at this. The Chief Justice, President, Judge lost his voice and had to adjourn court. Then the president of Legislative Council died. When court was resumed, the judge again lost his voice, and he had difficulty speaking. The jury believed to have supernatural interventions. They do not like the personal, spiritual, and ancestral power that we were using to protect us. Voodoo means spirit. They had to erase our spirit, our strength, in order for us to be docile. Because what was done in Haiti shook the foundation of owning slaves. But you know, y'all stay dangerous. I'm pretty
Hoodoo and voodoo are both African American spiritual practices, but they have some key differences. Hoodoo, also known as root work, involves the use of herbs, roots, and other natural objects for spiritual and medicinal purposes, and is often used for protection, luck, and love spells. Hoodoo also incorporates Christian elements and is often practiced alongside Christianity. Voodoo is a religion that originated in present-day Benin and Togo, but evolved into the practice closely associated with Haiti by way of the transatlantic slave trade. It involves the worship of spirits called Loa, and practitioners use ritual objects to communicate with these spirits. Voodoo also incorporates elements of Catholic, African, and indigenous spirituality. Voodoo has a hierarchical priesthood, litany, prayers, and rituals much like other organized religions. So while both hoodoo and voodoo have African roots and involve spiritual practices with an emphasis on ancestor worship, hoodoo is more focused on the natural environment, while voodoo is a religion with a strong emphasis on connection with the spirit world.
The main spirits would be Papa Legba, who's the intermediary between the metaphysical world and the physical world. You have Dambala, who is the spiritual sovereign, or the high spiritual deity of voodoo. You have Ogun, which is the spirit of war. And you have Baron Samedi, which is the spirit of the dead and magic.
The African concept of death is not finite like it can be in some terms of the West, because people in the West sometimes tend to view death as being a period, punctually, whereas Africans tend to view death as being a comma, you know, a brief respite and a continuation of the same thought on the other side.
And the African has, according to voodoo, has managed to master the spiritual plane in order to manipulate things on the physical plane. So in voodoo, the dead are not dead. There are living spirits without bodies. And that heaven and hell are not, heaven is not in the sky, hell is not on earth. It's right within the same dimension. So the reality is multi-dimensional.
Honor, respect, honor and respect, honor and respect. Divine all blessed greetings and salutations. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. Voodoo Hoodoo 101. Brought to you by, powered, produced, promoted, sponsored, and supported by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. Inspired by National Voodoo Day in Benin and led by the Black community members, New Orleans International Voodoo Day is a day of collective remembrance and spiritual reparation that is preceded by symposium and includes a procession to monuments at the sites of slavery in New Orleans, ritual to account for and seek abolition for the city and the country's participation in the institution of slavery, homage to those ancestors who suffered through and survived the transatlantic slave trade, and honor and appreciation for the achievements of those who came out of this oppression. 2 days of education, creative expression, elevation, cultural exchange, and above all, healing. Through authentic voodoo traditions handed down through generations, we offer a path to healing from the ongoing ramifications of slavery and racism in the United States. Through an international partnership, New Orleans International Voodoo Day becomes a major annual event in New Orleans, bringing peace, relief, healing, and connecting New Orleans with Benin, Haiti, and the greater Pan-African diaspora, the major points of the transatlantic slave trade and hubs of voodoo, as well as all nations where African traditional religions are practiced today, in a healing circuit and drawing visitors from around the world. And we continue to show love and appreciation for those of you who show up here with us live at 9 p.m. U.S. Central Standard Time, Monday through Friday, weeknights, here on a social media platform near you. And we certainly appreciate our live chat participants. Greetings, Britt Brat Dash. We appreciate you. Daniel Neal, faithful community member, we certainly appreciate your participation and support. And certainly we appreciate the continued loyalty and support of our co-hosts. My first priest, my Black Hawk Voodoo Wildman, my armor bearer, Brother Joshua Nylan Tanner, Sister Toni Val Martinez, the Queen Mother, and our Elder Reggie Green Soap, the leader of Shrine of the White Cloth. In the continuation of our narrative, the effect of the Nat Turner slave revolt on the health and welfare of 19th century slaves in southeastern Virginia and ultimately throughout the South. A great deal is made on the fact that Nat Turner was moved to rebellion by divine revelations. But this must be taken in the context of the time and the prevailing religious ideas. Nat Turner claimed to have been inspired by 9 separate revelations in which angels and visions appeared before him, often while in the fields, and compelled him to act. To the modern reader, this idea is outside the mainstream and supports the portrayals of Nat Turner as a wild, fanatical Baptist preacher, as Drury would argue in his 1900 work. But it is important to take this in the context of the Second Great Awakening that Elder Reggie spoke to briefly on last night's episode. At this time, the rationalization of the Enlightenment that guided many of the founding fathers was giving way to a more ecstatic and emotional religion. It is during the Second Great Awakening that American Protestantism shifted from the Calvinist view of hellfire and damnation to a greater emphasis on salvation and rebirth. Furthermore, the evangelical movement also largely rejected the Calvinist notion of predestination in favor of the concept of universalism. This meant that heaven was no longer the exclusive domain of a few who had already been selected, but rather was open to anyone who accepted God in salvation. It was from this time period that we get much of the modern evangelical movement's strong emphasis on a personal and intimate connection with God, which forms the basis of Southern Baptism as a whole. Turner himself, as part of this world, was baptized, reportedly by a white preacher, and born again. Because of the emphasis on a personal connection with God, the idea of an individual receiving personal revelation was by no means considered outside the mainstream. In meetings and revivals, people opened themselves up to visions and to having the Holy Spirit enter them to give them divine revelation. The idea of a very personal connection with God made the acceptance of Nat Turner's revelations easy for the other slaves. The idea would have been less palatable to local whites at that time, but that is more because they were confident that God supported their peculiar institution than the fact that it was divine revelation. The plans for the revolt had been discussed for several weeks prior to the revolt by Nat Turner and his fellow rebels. The rebels, who lived on various plantations in the area, had often met to picnic and talk at locations known as Cabin Pond in Southampton County, Virginia, not far from the home of Joseph Travis, where Turner was a slave. For months, the talk had turned to insurrection, and plans had been made. On the night of August 21st, 1831, the conspirators finished their final meeting at about 10:30 p.m. They had decided to act. They intended to begin their revolt by killing the Travis family while they slept, and then move from plantation to plantation, killing every white person they could find. The idea was to gain momentum, both in persons and materials, as they traveled to work their way to the country seat of Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, they would be able to take the local armory and hold the town. If they failed, the plan was to proceed southeast to the Dismal Swamp, where they could hide out for an extended area of time and possibly even create a free society like the Maroons or the Gullah Geechee. This was the totality of the planning in which the insurrectionists had engaged. No plans for which plantations should be hit first had been drawn up, and no contact had been made at these plantations. They simply planned on setting out and hoping people joined them. This complete lack of planning both doomed them and may have possibly allowed the revolt to take place. In previous revolts, notably the highly planned Denmark-Vesey revolt, the conspiracies were detected and quashed before the revolts ever took place due to the fact that many people were involved in the planning and had information. On the other hand, the utter lack of preparation displayed from the very beginning of the Nat Turner also doomed it to failure. Soon after the final planning meeting concluded and action had been decided upon, the band set out for the Travis plantation. The first act for the group, once they arrived, was not to acquire supplies, but rather they headed straight for the Travis cedar presses and drank until approximately 3 a.m. Once they had significantly fortified themselves for the grisly work ahead of them, they sneaked into the house with a ladder and killed the 4 sleeping inhabitants. The killing continued as they moved from farm to farm, but they faced several setbacks. When the rebels arrived at Wiley Francis farm, they found that the Francis family had been warned, and the family and slaves stood armed and ready to fight them if they attacked. This was not the only act of slaves resisting Turner. At the Whitehead home, Nat's deputy Will found and killed 7, leaving only a daughter who a slave had hidden and taken to safety. Additionally, at the Whitehead home, all but 2 of the slaves dissolved into the woods, and the 2 who were forced into joining the rebellion escaped the first chance that they got. By mid-afternoon on Monday, August 22nd, the whole of Southampton County was on high alert, and although gripped by fear, the residents had organized a resistance that was preparing for a counter-assault on the insurrectionists. It was soon thereafter, while Nat Turner and his band were making their way towards Jerusalem, that they met their first resistance in the form of Captain Alexander Pete and a group of local recruits armed with small fowling guns. Initially, the rebels were able to mount a defense to the whites' counter-assault and repel the force, but this success did not last long. Soon after the gunfire broke out, a second group of whites arrived to bolster the first group. Turner's rebels quickly found themselves outgunned and were forced to beat a hasty retreat. By the time the morning of August 23rd arrived, the rebels were reduced to no more than 20, and most could see the end was near. The rebels made their final stand that day at the Blunt House and disbanded. Many fled into the woods or returned to their home plantations. It is difficult to put a date to the end of the revolt. The insurrectionists never held a formal surrender, and Nat Turner was not captured until October 30th. But for all intents and purposes, the revolt ended at the Blunt House. By the end of August 23rd, between 57 and 60 whites, all residents of Southampton County, had been killed by Nat Turner's band, and no fewer than 38 blacks had been killed by the local militias. Some of the blacks had been involved in the revolt, while others simply had the misfortune of being black in Southfolk County. And as I begin to reintroduce my co-host, Brother Joshua Nylan Turner, Queen Mother Sister Toni Martinez, and Elder Reggie, known here as Green Soap. I mean, I'm sure they have their opinions and commentary about the passage. Again, we want to emphasize the effect that these continuous, unceasing revolts had, coupled with the successful Haitian uprising, and then how that subsequently played into how we were treated here in the New Orleans area and ultimately throughout the South. Greetings to my beloved co-hosts. Please come on in as you will.
Good night, everybody, and the listening audience. Glad you could join us. Elder Reggie, Divine Prince, Brother Joshua. Listening at all the people who they killed in the revolt, I would say it was a success. Even though the participants, Nat Turner got captured and they were executed or something happened to them. I still think they sent a strong message to the colonizers. I mean, you got 60-some dead white people in one area from slaves rising up. That was a big wake-up call for them. I wonder how many say, oh, hell no, this ain't worth it. I'm going back to England. I'm going back to France, wherever I came from, because all of this just ain't worth it. I'll find another way to make some money. And, I know a lot of our people suffered that wasn't even nowhere near the revolt, just because the colonizers were angry and afraid they had to take it out on somebody.
Yeah.
And sadly, we still fighting today. What you think, Brother Joshua?
I had a few thoughts about what he. Good evening, everybody. Elder Reggie, Sister Toni, and good listening to all this. I had a few thoughts, especially about what he first brought up concerning the Second Great Awakening. It just made me think of from my experience in terms of being around Black spirituality most of my life, whether it be in the church, whether it be, here in New Orleans with my family in the church early on and coming into spirituality and voodoo here with Divine Prince and the House of Divine Prince and Source now. It made me think of concerning earlier in my age, going to tent revivals. It made me think about like who attended that, who was operating that, who was coming to it, and it was a different showing of people that would show up to these events versus what was held in the actual church itself inside of four walls. But it also made me think about like just the outside environment and its influence on spiritual nature. And then this great awakening was pushed by the Protestants, and it was like an approach of them trying to approach the practices that we was doing by the river and in the wilderness. They'll set up a tent, they'll start their service and try to see who would spiritually gravitate towards them versus going, where we normally go, what we normally do. And that interaction I was able to see as a child, just seeing passerbyers or people that was drinking or people that was, just walking and going home with a beer, and to see how they would interact with the space. It brought me back to that, which was very interesting.
It's a good point, Brother Joshua. Good evening, everyone. Divine Prince, Sister Toni, and the collective audience in the chat. Divine Prince, he brought up a good topic for me, and it triggered me, and I wanted to read something. And it was the number 9. So Nat Turner had 9 revelations, but where are these revelations coming from? I see them coming from the realm of the spirit, ancestors, angelic, or whatever. He's getting downloads from somewhere that is propelling him to meet with others to formulate a plan that they actually executed. So I said, let me type in the number 9 in voodoo, and this is what Google give me. I just want to read a snippet of it, please. In voodoo, the number 9 holds significant meaning, often associated with completion and wisdom. It is considered a lucky number, symbolizing the end of a cycle before a new one begins, and it is linked to humanitarianism and selflessness. Practitioners often use the number 9 in rituals and spells, reflecting its spiritual resonance and the importance of its place on inner knowledge and giving back to others. And as I broke that down, that's exactly what Nat Turner was doing. Not saying he doing it knowing what I'm reading now, but when you unpack what he did, the 9 revelation, maybe he had 9 meetings. They killed 68 people. I just see a lot of symbology in that, also with the reawakening. And as we unpack this around voodoo and revolt, I just see that Nat Turner was dealing with the ancestor realm on a high level. And that's what I wanted to add at this moment.
I gotta agree with you. He's working with liberation, the spirit of liberation, and liberating the people that were subjugated. I've seen a few. I've been reading a couple of the stoner revolt. I was reading about that, and they was talking about like their that revolt and what happened and how they came up against people it was interesting to read about it. I would actually I don't have it up right now to be able to even recite it, but they had occasions where they ran into white people and they killed them, and they had some occasions when they ran into white people and they didn't kill them because of their behavior and how they were towards them, like previous to all that. So it's like I would have to say that the revolution was not of the spirit of it was in spirit, and it was according to treatment and according to the time and the context of what was going on and their subjugation and their liberation. It wasn't just to kill people.
No, in revolts, even revolts is definitely a selflessness act, because you, in your head, you are moving for the greater good of the collective. So you're going to go out there and you're going to be a martyr, and you hope in your martyrdom free up others. So when we think of the Nat Turners, the Denmark Vesey's, Charles DeLong, I'm just speaking of those like in the Americas who was being oppressed at that time, they had to move, I think, by divine grace to move from consciousness, act like that, because at times we all want to live. We don't want to be the sacrificial lamb. We want to live, but when you make that stand to do that, that is a powerful act.
Yes, it is.
I think it's important too that we, sort of do away with this whole concept of house nigga, feel nigga. Everybody was at danger, and often when there was, an escape, there was often collaboration from within the house to the field, often for resources, in terms of timing and scheduling. Nobody knew when Massa was going to be away better than those house Negroes. They knew where the supplies were. They knew where the weaponry was. They often knew where the supposed prescriptions and medications and the liquor was, and often were tapped in, as a resource as part of this escape plan. And many big mamas sacrificed themselves, stayed behind to allow the freedom of her children and her family members.
Excellent point, Divine Prince. Excellent.
Yes, they had to get the information without help from the enslaved that were in the house. I don't think they ever could have pulled off a thing like that, or a revolution, or insurrection, or anything. And it was often came to be learned after that it was those that worked in the field with them that turned them in. Who you think ran ahead and warned the people about the other families getting killed, and they was marching toward them? Who you think did that if all the white people was killed?
Phil Hands.
Nobody was paying attention what happened on the first plantation. All he had to do was keep running, trying to get to wherever the best place to get. Without that, they could have wiped them all out, but somebody had to go tell them. And if they killed all the white people, that only was their own people. And that's why we say all skin folks ain't kin folks. In the color of things, darker blacks considered themselves to be the ones that worked in the field, and the lighter blacks like myself were the ones in the house. But when you look at it, the ones in the house mostly stayed in the house after the insurrection. They wasn't the one running out there going and tell, they coming. They done killed everybody at Old Bob Plantation, and they done set this on fire. You got to realize how far houses were apart, plantations were apart, for somebody to get ahead of people that's moving to warn other people. And a large majority of the ones in the house were actually females. It wasn't too much for a man to do in the house.
But I agree everything you're saying, Sister Toni. One thing that I was impressed from the reading is that the networking, I guess I never gave it no thought, the networking that the slaves was doing amongst the different plantations out there. According to the way Divine Prince was reading, there was meeting at night, there was breaking away, they had a certain day and time when they was going to make their strike. I didn't thought that slaves could move and maneuver around like that. I was always under the impression they worked from sun up to sundown, and they just didn't have time to galvanize like that and strategize. But
well, we know from
I see it's wrong.
Well, we know from the telling of the Maroon stories that that wasn't the truth. Saint Milo, in particular, is documented of having gone and come and gone again, and would come back to his job and do his job, and then would disappear into the swamps on the weekends. And depending on who the oppressor, the slave driver was, the degrees of punishment, discipline would certainly vary from plantation to plantation, from master to master. And I would imagine from job to job, depending on your job and your ability, to have mobility in the fields, as Toni just mentioned, you had a little map, if you will, of your area and your region and what was hidden and otherwise unexplored, by the masters. So we know that it was documented that there were people who escaped and came back, who didn't always get their foot chopped off or didn't always, get 40 lashes. But certainly the behavior was commonplace and constant.
And that behavior comes from we had to have a different mind. We had to put on a mindset of being enslaved. These people we weren't okay with, our ancestors was not okay with being enslaved and being subjugated. So it was like having multiple jobs or going multiple places. I'm sure they gathered multiple information and intel, and it was a resource to them in more ways than one. Even gathering herbs and stuff, probably, for their own survival. So you got to look at it that way too, especially down here in the bayou, in New Orleans, different landscape.
And just like the saying goes, where there's a will, there's a way. We know from historical records that husbands and wives or lovers who were separated, and mothers and children who were separated to neighboring plantations, often snuck around at night and to see their other family members. And that took a lot of planning and covering up by the other slaves. And that's pretty much what we do now for each other, for our friends. Especially if they had an overseer that as soon as it got sundown, he went to drinking, fell off drunk, and they passed the word. If he came looking for him, to tell him he was gone somewhere. The signals they used, the animals, the bird calls they used to communicate with each other. They took the drum from us, but they didn't take everything from us. We are great mimickers. And mostly everybody had their own identifying call, as they call it. So if they heard a wolf out in the distance, the person at the other plantations was like, oh, that's Elder. That's Elder. Go to the meeting spot. Elder at the meeting spot. We found a lot of ways to communicate. One thing, Pig Latin. We developed a whole language to speak in front of them and speak amongst each other where they would not know what we were talking about.
Yeah. You got to think we had languages before too, and it's multiple languages coming from here in America. The Algonquin language, Jesus, man. I'm trying to
But
think
I think
right
the
now.
Pig Latin was the only one that everybody, no matter where they were, if they were black in the United States, they could speak it.
Yeah.
We will find a way around it. Just
And
like today, is nothing that they can make that we can't find a way around it.
First trade language, was sign language. And that's what people don't know, and that's something that was created here. And traveled all over the world. But it's very and you have to think about the things that we've done even to current era, like even the World was it World War II, the codes that
Mhm.
it was a woman that was able to decipher that, a black woman. So it was like we have that in our DNA in a way where if we tap into it and we're sincere.
And it was the Navajo language that they couldn't
Yeah.
crack that our military used to
Yeah.
win the war.
Exactly.
Mhm.
What is superior is not always what is shown as superior. And I think that the value of these things coming and having our perspective of understanding that, and not a way that they've taught us, but in a way that we have done our research and actually have sought out knowledge and information on genuinely and spiritually. It's definitely got we have the ability to protect ourselves in more ways than one. And people say we have the saying down here, we're never alone in New Orleans, because we're not, never are.
And I always say, where there's a will, there's a way. If somebody wants something bad enough, they're going to find a way to make it happen. And that brings us to the end of our show tonight. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Elder Reggie to close us out. I look forward to being here with you tomorrow at 9 p.m. Elder Reggie, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Sister Toni. Divine Prince, a great show again tonight. Brother Joshua, good input. Collective chat, I'm watching you. I don't say much, but I'll read what you're saying there. But the one little closeout thing I like to say before I go to Lest We Forget. Yeah, what Nat Turner and them did was a physical act, but I also picked up in the reading that Divine Prince, that was metaphysical things going along with the physical. So the two kind of, to me, worked it together to make this event, which is in the history books. Now it's an historical event that happened. And I think it was the coming of the metaphysical and the physical, working on behalf of a people who wanted to be free. Lest we forget, the spiritual medicine of voodoo brings healing and relief from the shackles of slavery that binds the master and the slave to the same chain of social division. Wow, that I want to read that again and listen to it this time with a third ear. The spiritual medicine, voodoo brings healing and relief from the shackles of slavery that binds the master and the slave to the same chain of social division. Metaphysical. Ashe, ashe, ashe. Good night, everyone, and we love you. See you tomorrow.
Good night.
All is a blessing.
Oh, sure.
In Uganda, many politicians secretly consult traditional healers or witch doctors in order to give them an edge in the ballot box. Some fear rivals may use witchcraft against them, leading to superstitious behaviours like avoiding handshakes. Right now, it's election season in Uganda, and this witch doctor's skills are in high demand.
When a person comes and asks me if they will go through or fail, I normally give them some medicine so they can win the election and their opponent will not go through. There are many people coming now because of the election season.
Rose's career began in 1980 after being possessed by a spirit that she said she had to overcome to gain the spiritual authority she now claims. Critics, including church leaders, disapprove of these practices, but many who regularly attend church also secretly use traditional spiritual services.
Sometimes culture becomes a scientific thing. It be the herbs, something you bite, and when you are talking, you win the case in court.
However, witchcraft isn't a guarantee of success.
Sometimes I also fail. I can't solve all of the problems, and I just say, I can't handle this, just like in the hospital when death comes.
In Uganda,
Please, allow me to show you something.
They say I'm crazy and that might be true. I got this white in my DNA, yeah, I'm coming for you. It's time we turn the tables, flip these motherfuckers on you. I wanna see you hanging from trees, it's time you pay for your dirt and your showtime. You created the monster, you created the beast. Now all this savagery you just gon' reap. I'm coming home, daddy, to the plantation, and I'm taking the lives of everybody, including the children, on some Nat Turner. Oh, do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. I met my girl Harriet at the gate. If you wanna know how she doing, yeah, she's straight. But she had one question: when we gon' get up? All that talking tough, yeah, we don't walk it tough. She got it locked and loaded, got that piece up on her side. She looked me in my eyes and said, "Meet you ready to ride?" Moving forward, you gotta use both eyes. Watch your front and watch your back. Keep your hands up on your gas. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. He sit at the table, but he don't order no bacon. He greet me in those words, assalamu alaikum. Got them glasses on his face and them waves in his head. He go by the name of Detroit Red. He looks me in my eye and says, you only get one try. Know that your biggest opposition will come from the inside. I know you wanna love them all, but don't even try, because they'll smile up in your face while plotting your demise. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down.